better.
I'm one of those people as well.
Right.
I always say if I want to fix my diet, I need to go to the gym.
Right.
I always say that because when I said it to, I think some of my friends in my team the other day, if I'm going to go and work out for an hour and I'm going to go do a HIIT workout for an hour, for example, it's so painful that the last thing I want to do is throw it all away with like a fucking Krispy Kreme. So my diet then falls in place suddenly. And that's always, whenever I go through a moment in my life where I'm like, Steve, you've lost control of your diet here. It's how can I get myself to the gym as the catalyst to, get my diet in order.
And that's the problem with a lot of, not the problem, but just the limitation of a lot of studies, which is, especially like epidemiology. And when I say epidemiology, it's like this group does this group does this, and we're looking at what other things happen. Yeah. Well, people don't do things in isolation, right? So you'll hear a study like, I'm thinking of something, people who eat more protein have higher rates of this. Okay, well, if we look at where most people get their protein sources in the Western world, it's highly processed, energy-dense foods. Protein tends to just be a proxy for overall more calories. And so is it the protein or is it all the calories they're taking in, right? And again, people, their lifestyles and habits tend to go together, right? Like you hear X group was more prone to heart disease, but then they also tend to smoke more, drink more alcohol. Like it is very difficult to disconnect those habits and those lifestyle habits, right? They call it healthy user bias in studies. Mm-hmm. It's one of the things we have difficulty with, and that's why, again, human randomized control trials are kind of our gold standard, because I think this is important to touch on the word randomized. Okay, so if we're talking about epidemiology or cohort studies, so cohort is a little bit better than your standard epidemiology because they're taking groups of people and they're following them for years. So each person is kind of their own control, right? Mm-hmm. But still, people who are more healthy tend to do more overall healthy things. People who are more unhealthy tend to do more. It's hard to disconnect those two. But when you do a study and you say, okay, one group is going to do a low carb diet, one group's going to do a low fat diet, and we're going to randomize them, right? Why is that important? Well, what if we let people self-select? Okay, well, if they just say, go whichever group you want. Well, and I'm just speculating, right? But for example, low carb diet's very hot right now. A lot of people may have a very strong proclivity to go to that group thinking it's healthier, having a more positive viewpoint of it, and they may clean up a lot more other aspects of their life. But if we randomize, what we can assume through that randomization process is that any inherent characteristics of the subjects are going to be equally distributed amongst the groups. And that is why that's so important. And I remember I was listening to a breakdown on a podcast one time, and they were discussing a study that was looking at, they were looking at intermittent fasting versus continuous energy restriction. So just normal dieting. And basically the crux of the study was they found no real difference in weight loss. And the person on there was a very pro intermittent fasting person. They said, well, how, they don't know. Maybe the one group was eating a bunch of junk food or whatever. And I'm thinking, this person doesn't understand randomization, right? Like that would be a very odd thing to just, it actually would lead you to the conclusion that intermittent fasting might cause you to seek out junk food, right? So again, randomization is not perfect, but the reason it's so important is because it helps us get rid of that healthy user bias. And I think, again, but the downside to randomized control trials is you can only run them for so long because they're controlled.
Is your